Hello and welcome along to the Season 12 F1 recap. We already recapped Season 16 of Tier 2 and Season 4 of Tier 3, but now it's time to do F1. And we had a lot of things coming into the season that we were looking forward to. Leo Lund moving from McLaren to Aston Martin. Jak and TB making up the McLaren lineup. Ferrari went with Miniko and Cookie after Egg, Gecko, and TB, all before the season started, left Ferrari. Speaking of Egg, he was over at Red Bull. And a lot more good things to look forward to. However, we started round 1 in Bahrain, and in Bahrain, it was Leo Lund for Aston Martin taking pole position. Obviously, it was a race where Leo was challenged. You know, going to a slower car, you don't always expect to have that dominance straight away, and he didn't have it. Ding had swapped the lead with him. Gecko was up there. Cookie was up there. I mean, there was many drivers fighting at the front, but in the end, after the pit stops, it was Leo and Jak pulling away, and on a last lap overtake, Leo Lund beat Jak to the flag. Egg finished P3 for Red Bull, returning to the podium. Gecko was P4 for VCarb, and that was a very good performance that people were looking at, saying, oh, what could he do next week? What could he do in a better car? Well, only time would tell. And TB, who started from the back of the grid, and P19, I believe with a qualifying ban, he finished in P10 after a collision with Luke Grange. He was penalized, but still kept the points finish. Round 2, Saudi Arabia, we had Leo Lund take another pole position again. Aston Martin, that pole position they had in Bahrain, that was their first. That was not a grid penalty since Season 4 when they were Racing Point. I believe that was Matt GW back then, but either way, Aston Martin taking back-to-back poles for the first time in their career as a team in RPL. Gecko led this race, just to clarify why I said Gecko, what could he do in Saudi? Well, he led the race and then crashed later on. But anyways, a safety car did change things, but it was Leo Lund in the end, beating TB by 2 seconds. Leo Lund only beat him by 2 seconds because he was penalized. There was an incident here with Florian. And Florian kind of said around this time, hey, Leo Lund, he's in a fast car, but not the fastest. Let's see what he does in that car. Because once he's in a car, he can be challenged, and he may not always be the best. And that was proven from this point onwards. Florian, speaking of him, he got penalized, but he still took the podium spot, P3. Reece Dainty was P4, and there was a big fight between Miniko, George, Ding, Cookie, who all were P5 to P8. Even the Ferraris had a small collision there. And Egg. Turn 4 struck him. He hit the wall. He was out of the race from it. In Australia, it was a return of glory for HSR Gecko. He was on pole position this race, a season later after he injured himself in this race, or before this race, excuse me, and then raced this race a season prior. But regardless, a dominating victory from HSR Gecko, returning to the top step for the first time in nearly 2,000 days, and also nearly 200 races. Gecko beat Jak and Florian. Florian again on the podium. And by this point, we're thinking, what a championship battle we're going to have on our hands. McLaren haven't won yet. Florian's up there. Gecko's up there. Leo's up there. Even Gecko was in the VCarb full time and not in the Red Bull. Cookie P4 after a penalty. Leo got in a collision with some people. He pissed off some drivers. TB being one of them. Florian being another. Jak and Leo had a qualifying collision as well. Reece from the back of the grid finished P8. There were a lot of things to look at. Sauber almost got their first points this race of the season. Then we went to Japan. And that is where the last lap move from Egg made everything work in the end. Egg started from the back of the field, got to the front, and won the race on the last lap. Move at 130R after a charge to the field won him the race. Now in the end, it was a close fight with Skither, Miniko, TB for the podium, but after some penalties were dished out, it was TB in P3. Then Ding, then Reece. Leo Lund finished P11 for Williams after he made the move from Aston to Williams just a round or so prior. It, like I said, was not working out for Leo. He ran out of fuel this one, but he, in fact, did get a good start for Williams. P2, that's their best. I mean, fair credit there, but Nothing to show for it in the race. Miniko, Skither, one of those two would have had the podium, but penalties cost them in the stewards room. In Imola, it was Skither returning to the pole, and it was back-to-back poles for Mercedes. Florian just got his first in Japan. Skither got one in Imola, and around this point, he was shaping up to be the all-time pole sitter leader. Skither finished P2 to make it a Mercedes 1-2. This was their first 1-2 finish since the other Italy race back in season 9. Reece returns to the podium in P3. Leo Lund P4. Started P2 for the team, and Ferrari had a disastrous day. Tadpole reserving down in 8th, Cookie down in 15th. But McLaren didn't have the best days either, 6th and 7th. You gotta be wondering, when is McLaren gonna get that first win of the season? When is things gonna change? Well, it changed in Spain for them, with the fake TB winning in the stewards room. Yeah, Spain was a bit chaotic. TB won from P2 on the grid. Gecko was on pole that day, but there were penalties dished out too. Kian and Liam Stevens making their debuts. They would have won if they didn't get penalties. However, the fake TB being in the right place at the right time got the victory. Florian was P2, Jak was P3, Leo made another change. He went to V-Carb to finish out the season. KVS had a good showing for Alpine, and after a lap 1 collision with Miniko and JTK, Miniko said, "Look, I'm done with my seat. I need to call it quits for a little bit and go reserve." Either way, Cryptic also had a moment in this race. He caused a safety car by crashing in the pit lane when the pit stop area was going on. And then in Silverstone, McLaren backed it up with yet another victory. Jack Miles getting his first of the season. At this point, it seemed like a championship race between these three podium drivers, Jak, TB, and Leo. No one else was going to fight them at this stage. And it did seem apparent that although we could have got maybe a little bit more of a championship race, this was going to be our 3. A collision at the end also had Florian Fenzelter kicked out of the top 5. Was not his day. In Hungary, the storyline may have been Dom intentionally straightlining Leo after Leo got V-Carb's first pole, but it was the fake TB pulling off a strategic masterclass, getting the victory. Jack Miles was second, and after all the chaos with Dom and Leo, Skither was P3, and Aston Martin with Cryptic and Ding, they were P4 and P5. John got P10, and that was Haas's first point of the season. Another notable thing from this race, Alex Norris made his Tier 1 debut, and Owen, who crashed down at turn 2 in a strange place, said his sister was distracting him in the background, so that's why he caused a VSC. In Spa, chaos and pandemonium struck. Leo Lund may have gave another V-Carb pole position, but he didn't end off that way again. Leo collided with Jak and TB late on, down the Kemmel Straight, and that ended in tears. A championship collision between all 3 championship contenders allowed Jack Miles to take the victory. Jak won in the storage room, then it was Cryptic and KVS. Willow on his debut was P4. John, he was involved in a lap 1 collision with Egg, who got knocked out of the points because of it. Egg got a super penalty, 20 seconds. Yeah, he had a collision with John on the opening lap. Egg, I guess trying to pull a NASCAR style move, bump drafting John. It did not work. TB, with that damage he got, he was back in P7. And Alex Norris, amid all the chaos, P10 for Sauber, his first Tier 1 points finish. For this race, they were maybe looking at moving him up into Tier 1, and that did not happen until after Zandvoort, our next round. Other notable things, George for Mercedes, Ding for Aston, Eggs Red Bull, they were all outside the points this race. And Gecko were only DNF. Gecko having a lot of trouble around this area because that happened again in Zandvoort when he was racing for Red Bull and still made about 7 pit stops this race. He finished down in P17, and for the first time in F1 history, we had all drivers finish. I mean, 3 of them were a lap down, including Gecko. Wasn't his day, but it was Leo Lund, his teammate's day. From P19, a qualifying ban, Leo Lund getting the championship challenge maybe back on. He won ahead of TB, Jak and Florian, a drag race there from P2 to P4. Reece, it was announced it was his last Tier 1 race for a while. He was P9. And Alex Norris was P10. Causing some chaos. Pascal, one of Florian's friends racing, had 45 seconds of penalties in the end. Yeah, it wasn't his day either. Outside the points because of that. And now we were past the halfway point of the season. So we got past the halfway point of the season, and it was going to be something crazy for Leo Lund to win this championship. Realistically, it was TB and Jak, but Leo Lund had that outside chance. And Zandvoort did help it. But with Leo having his championship rivals, TB and Jak, finished right behind, that was no help. In Monza, TB, another strategic masterclass. A win from TB. Yeah, in a rainy Monza race, he played the cards beautifully. A win ahead of Jack Miles, making it a McLaren 1-2. And also, on pole position at his home race, Florian Van Zelter collided with Leo in this race. Leo didn't just collide with Florian, he collided with Jak on the last lap. Florian P5 after a penalty, and Leo P8. Speaking of home races, P5 for Florian, P9 for Andrea, and P10 for Ding was the first time ever in RPL F1 we had 3 Italians in the points at their home race. Since Reece is no longer Tier 1, FX7 Danny took over that spot, and he played the slipstream game with Egg beautifully. I mean, they didn't finish well. Egg did finish P3 with a puncture, but Danny, outside the points, still looking for some points. Gecko, another struggling race down in P12. Again, you were wondering where the curse was going to be over. And even in Baku, our next round, Egg originally finished on the podium, but was penalized after with a humongous penalty. He finished down in P15 because of it. Cookie was penalized too in his return. Remember, he got changed to the Merc Academy. A little trade with Willow this had happened with. P14 for Cookie in Baku. Baku was chaotic, but it wasn't super chaotic. However, Egg delivered Red Bull their 100th pole position at this round. Jak won the race ahead of TB, and just to remind people, TB at Monza and Baku, after 2 pole positions he got after returning to pole, he was outside of Q3. He did not make Q3. He was eliminated in Q2, but regardless, he still got the McLaren 1-2. Together in his return to Ferrari, P3, and Alex Norris was P4 in a call-up to Ferrari. You'll see this in Singapore, how this happened again for GTK, another points finish, but he was P6 while George was P5. And after this race, George got moved up to Tier 1. And congrats to Danny on another points finish for VCarb. In Singapore, chaos struck with the championship contenders. Jak and TB came together. TB was battling Jak for the lead. Jak was the leader, and Jak was on defense. Although Jak could have won, it was Skither after the restart that won the race ahead of Leo. And Leo Lund, who finished P2, had that controversial pole position. Remember, he cut the track to get another lap in. He didn't need to get in qualifying. But Leo Lund, another V-carb pole, Skither a front row, but Skither got the victory in the end. Jak Miles salvaging the most with a P3 in the P3 in the race for the sake of the championship. Willow P4 for Aston Martin, that was his best result at the time. George in their top 5. And Alex Norris, Sauber's best result of the season, P9. Gecko, he finished us with the points. Yet another struggling race. And obviously we know it, TB, DNF from his collision with Jak. So Texas came and it was another home race for Skither. Leo Lund took pole for VCarb and only managed P3. Skither won the race in another classic battle with Jak Miles to come down to the finish. Egg was P4 after a little controversy between him and Leo. It got Leo knocked out of his seat after this. JTK held on for P5, a wonderful performance from the Alpine driver. And Miniko and Danny, Haas and VCarb drivers, finished in the points. TB was having an aggravating time trying to pass George up Williams, but TB finished outside the points and didn't even get to Q3 again. George outside the points this race. Not their days they would have wanted. In Mexico, TB had a better race. He finished 1-2 with Jak. Jak managed the victory. And again, at this point of the season with Leo out of a ride, it was Jak and TB for the championship. KVS managed a really great P3, by the way. It was looking like to be his day, but it just didn't happen. And when Skither took pole position here in Mexico, he had the record, and eventually had the record to himself, of all-time pole sitter leader. George was P5, and JTK, who put in a monstrous lap in qualifying, was P6 in the race. Red Fire and Blonde got the call up to Mercedes. They got double points for them. And in the end, in Mexico, it was Jack Miles' day. And it was looking like Jack Miles could win the championship. A bit more closer at this stage, because in Portugal, Jack Miles, who got another front row, ended up winning the race. Jack Miles held on. Gecko got a penalty in the last lap battling Jack, and Gecko was knocked off the podium completely. And finally, Gecko had that turnaround for Red Bull he desperately needed. I mean, Gecko got pole position, but he did not get the podium finish he would have wanted, and got on track. KVS was battling controller issues. He could have had the podium, but in the end, it was Skither for Ferrari from the back of the grid after a problem in qualifying. And Cookie for Mercedes returned to the podium. Unk still got it. TB tried a very poor strategy, but only managed P7. And after this race, Jack Miles could win the championship. Knights returned to the points. George didn't have the best of days. He DNF'd from this race. A lot of up and down days. Night Owl made his Tier 1 debut. Yeah, so we knew next week in China, Jack Miles could become the champion. At this stage as well, McLaren were also wrapping up the Constructors' Championship for what would be back-to-back times, and they did do it. Fair play to McLaren, but they were looking for the Drivers' Championship next. And in a short race in China with 14 drivers, we knew it was possible. Cookie came together with Gecko. Cookie DNF'd because of it, and that kind of eliminated some competition for Jack if he were to fall down. TB wasn't having the best of times. He fell back. He spun as well. He only managed P7. So we knew Jack Miles had a chance for the championship since TB was not ahead of Jack. Jack P2 won the championship in China. Skither, dominating win. He was not the focus, sadly, but he won the race yet again. And Jack Miles, settling for P2, claimed his first ever championship. Goes to show when you're in backfield machinery for a while in RPL and you eventually prove yet and yet again you can do it, and you have 14 podiums before your first victory. I mean, although it took a while, Jack did deserve this, and you could be a nobody and become something. Remember, Jack Miles at the start of the F1 games didn't even know how to properly introduce the clutch in the start. Jack Miles was a champion in lower tiers, one in F3, one in Tier 2, one when it was F1.5, one in F2. He basically did it all, and took a long time to win the championship, but got it at the track he made his F1 debut at back in Season 4. KVS on the podium, Cryptic P4, Willow P5. Egg penalized after, and he did not maintain the podium spot he would have had. George P8 over Alex Norris, who was P9, and P10, Gecko after his collision with Cookie. Our next race in Vegas had some weird things happen, that was for sure, but JTK and KVS, they were practically screwed on the alternative strategy. Skither got pole ahead of KVS, it was a Ferrari front row lockout. KVS matched his best starting spot, and after a safety car with Miniko DNFing, that's when the chaos erupted, with some people not being maybe where they should have been. Skither, with another classic race to end it with Jack Miles, took the victory ahead of Jack Miles. And George Up Williams got on the podium for the first time in his F1 career. Finally, he broke through. Finally, he got the podium for Red Bull. And Alex Norris, P4, just an inch away from that podium for Sauber. That was his best result, tying Baku. Cryptic was P5. JTK was P6 after being screwed over. Josh, who made his return to Tier 1, was P9. And Beatnik shy of points on his F1 return at home. However, there was a young phenom we're not talking about, and that was F1 Shorts for Alpine. He qualified in Q3. He also finished in the top 10 as well. P7 qualifying, P7 race. Not bad from the driver who also got moved up to Tier 1 mid-season. So some championships were won by this point, and that did not stop Leo Lund, who returned. Leo Lund signed a reserve contract for Ferrari to finish out the season in RPL F1. I mean, it was basically too good not to take him if you look at where he does finish, regardless of some penalties. But for Leo Lund, just because the championship was over, that was not going to stop him from trying to deliver Haas their first podium as a team. And someone who has a podium with every team except for Haas was going to try to stop it, and that was Jack Miles. Yeah, Jack and Leo, the former teammates, came together again. But it was Skither on pole, ahead of Leo, and Leo gave Haas their best qualifying. Yeah, he did this with V-Carb, he did this with Williams, he did this with Haas. Who's he not doing it with? But in the end, Skither beat Leo barely. But Leo was penalized. So was Jack. Jack managed P3, Leo didn't. Willow got his first podium for Mercedes. Congrats to Willow. KVS was P5, JTK back there. He had that 10-second, and if he didn't have that 10-second, he would have been racing for the victory. He sped in the pit lane. Alex Norris was P8. Lyra Fusion, after a lap 1 incident, he was P9 on his Tier 1 debut. And F1 Shorts, who finished P11, by the way, was involved in a 5-wide collision at the opening start. You could find that on our YouTube channel. Yeah, that collision was quite stupid, but, you know, some drivers did manage to get through it and did get something out of it. Another storyline in that race was also George not having the best of days. Lap down for George, lagging out. But also Tiro, our only DNF from the race. He had to pick his sister up from the nightclub. Yeah, he had to go a bit early. Wasn't penalized for it, but fair play for making a headline out of yourself, because he also did the same thing in Abu Dhabi when he crashed at the pit lane as well. So in Abu Dhabi, our final race of the season, obviously, you know, JTK got the McLaren drive beforehand and TB dropped down to reserve. He just wasn't happy with the way things were changing, and you know what? He'll be able to go to Ferrari with a bit more in his own hands. But speaking of McLaren, JTK got his maiden pole position, finally broke through at Abu Dhabi. I mean, he won the race on track, but did not end up winning in the end. Jack Miles, who was on the front row in that race, also was penalized in the end at one of his favorite circuits. Cookie, after everything in the storage room, Leo penalized, Jack penalized, JTK penalized. Cookie was in the right place at the right time, similar to how Jack was back in Season 9 Vegas. Won the race. Yes, Cookie won in the storage room. And that was a nice surprise because he broke a 36 race drought. Finally, Cookie, looking to win, won again in RPL. He won in the storage room ahead of Cryptic in P2. Cryptic, another storage room P2. And JTK, P3 for McLaren. After penalized because of being too slow, too slow in the safety car restart, not maintaining minimum speed. KVS was P4, Jack was P5 after penalties. FX7 Danny got the call up to Red Bull to finish in P6 ahead of teammate Egg. Schwartz was in the points, he even made Q3, and Leo Lund managed P10. You're probably wondering, why was Leo Lund penalized? He would have had the first Haas podium again, a second week in a row, even after qualifying in the front row for them the week prior. Well, he had a collision in the last lap with Skither. Skither leading, taken out. Skither finished outside the points. Leo didn't. I mean, it was driving like that actually got Leo Lund banned from RPL. Yes, you're hearing that right. After the season, Leo Lund no longer allowed to race in RPL as things stand. Just the admins just determined that he was just too dirty to continue. And you know what? Some drivers will be happy, some drivers won't. But in the end, JTK, who got penalized, he did not win his first race. He would have won his first race. However, it was a long drought broken for Cookie, who won. In the end, in the Drivers' Championship, Jack Miles was the top man. Skither was P2, TB P4, Leo, and then Cryptic. And in total, this entire season, there were 15 drivers who managed to finish on the podium. In our Constructors' Championship, we had McLaren win it, had a Ferrari, who were losing drivers this whole entire season, left and right. You look at the Dom situation. You look at Miniko at the start. There were so many drivers Ferrari were losing, even reserves. But Ferrari managed to stick with Skither and KVS. Skither and KVS stuck with Ferrari, and in the end, they were P5 originally, but they came back to finish P2 in the end. Fair enough for them. Mercedes P3, Red Bull P4, Aston Martin P5 after their amazing start. V-Carb were only P6, and then it was Alpine, Haas, Williams, and Sauber to finish off the end in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, you look at how everything was. Season 12 of F1 was filled with a lot of chaos, filled with a lot of crazy stuff going on. I mean, when was it all going to stop? It finally did stop, and that was our final race. And we did have some awards to give out here in the end, which we did give out the season prior as well. This past season, driver with the most wins in the end, I believe Skither and Jak had a little tie there. That was 5 apiece. Most poles was Leo Lund at 6. Most podiums was Jak at 17. Best driver of the season, and then here we go. Here's the rest of it, folks. The drivers got to vote on these awards as well, which was very nice, in fact. And I'll give my say in it as well. We had quite a few awards handed out for the end of the season. We started off with Best Driver this season. The options were Jak, TB, Skither, and Leo Lund. And they gave it to Jack Miles. I would agree, but you know what? I could understand why people put Leo or Skither. You know, and that does make sense. However, Jack Miles getting 56% of the vote. Underperformed this season, the options were Cookie, Ding, Miniko, and Maxwell. Ding got the majority vote at 11 votes, 65%. And you know what? There were times he could have done better this season. I mean, I was very surprised, in fact, that he didn't get his once-a-season podium that he seems to get. But 65% of the vote went to Ding. The driver that overperformed this season, they gave it to Florian Fenzelter. 50% of the vote. The other options being Egg, Danny, and George. Biggest surprise this season went to Alex Norris. He nearly put a Sauber on the podium. 53% of the vote. GTK also had an Alpine front row start. Egg and Florian had made wins. Gecko returned to his winning ways. So those were the other options, but obviously you saw Alex Norris won that one. Alex Norris also won another award. He also got most underrated this past season. 50% of the vote. Other options, Willow, KVS, and Cryptic. I mean, Cryptic was quite underrated too this season, but he just didn't have it all. And the driver who was most overrated this past season, they gave it to HSR Gecko with 79% of the vote. Gecko, I mean, he won a race this season again, but he just didn't have everything that went his way. And also, he made it a little bit more difficult for his own self too. Red Fire, Leo, Cookie. They were the other options in that sense. So now looking back, we have some other awards to give out as well, like Best Race this season, Most Chaotic Race, and I would have to say our most chaotic race would be Spain, with the amount of penalties dished out in the storage room there. I mean, just think about it. Spain was a race where you didn't know who was going to finish where after the chaos that happened. I mean, Abu Dhabi was chaotic too. Vegas had a bit of a strategy change. Brazil was a great race overall. And I'm looking at some of these races and thinking, I mean, what race can you give it to? Monza was a bit chaotic. Zandvoort was too. Belgium was too. You know, it would have to be between Belgium and Spain. I'm going to give it to Spain, obviously, here. Because with Spain, it was just thing after thing after thing. Miniko on the opening lap there with his academy teammate. Cryptic crash in the pit lane. Craziness at the front. I mean, it was just back and forth that entire race. I mean, it's really between Spain and Belgium, and I give it to Spain. I think the only thing that Belgium just didn't have is the fact that we had two drivers who could have won the race, not win the race. In the storage room, you only had one driver have that happen. I mean, Belgium probably should have this, but again, I give it to Spain. And now our best race of the season, we do have some good candidates. I mean, you look at Bahrain or opening round, quite a bit of lead changes. It was a nice little preview for how things were going to be during this entire season. You have a race like Belgium, that was good. Zandvoort, that was good. Monza. Texas was a good race too. Brazil was a very good race. Vegas was a very good race. Abu Dhabi was a very good finale. But you know what? The best race of the season went to Brazil here because you look at the way things went in Brazil and you say, look, there's not many times that this DRS train galore is fun and it's just a bunch of ridiculousness. But it was actually a really good race, and watching it go over, even just ask our Kokon Beatnik, you know, his return to comms was a very good race, and maybe he chose a good one, but it was a season where DRS trains were full of it, and this race was the only race, maybe outside of a few other ones, but this race was probably one of the only races that you could say, hey, look, although we had the DRS train, it was actually a lot of fun. We had a race in Tier 3 this game cycle as well. It was back in Season 3 of Tier 3, Silverstone, where the DRS train to the front also was a bit ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun to commentate, and it was a lot of fun to look at too. I mean, the racing was incredible around Brazil. You just didn't know what was going to happen. You had overtakes in the middle sector, you had overtakes in the first and third, like you always do. But it was just crazy. Just crazy. There's no other way to describe it. That race had it all. I think Spa maybe gets a little underappreciated for the race that was, but that was definitely chaos for sure. And it was a very good race too. I think if I didn't choose Spain for my most chaotic race, I would have chose Spa. And I think if I didn't choose Brazil for the best race, maybe you could have gone with Monza just because the strategy and the rain and everything going on there. You had a lot of good races this season. Abu Dhabi was good too. Just sucks it ended in the stewards room like that too. But that's life and that happens. So either way, folks, that was our RPL Season 12 F1 recap. We're going into Season 13 on next game. And we'll be having some changes, of course. McLaren will have Florian and Cryptic. Jak and TB will be at Ferrari. Mercedes will have Cookie and Gecko. We have a lot of things. Luke Grange is returning. Our all-time win leader, our all-time champion. Skithers and Haas as teammate as well. There's a lot to look forward to on our next game on F1 25, folks. And as you know, I will not be part of the coverage. Titan Iron Wolf will be. And until next time, folks, we will see you then, and we'll see you for end of the game cycle recap and some awards to go with it later on. Ryan Searles signing off.